Hello?
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to introduce the rabbi. I want to thank SD. Thank you so much, SD. And thank you, Rabbi, for coming on. Rabbi Aryeh Kerzner is currently the Rav of Agudas Yisrael of Montreal and is both a noted posek and a popular public speaker and author. His many shiurim and speeches are enjoyed both locally and internationally. His articles are regularly featured in the Mishpacha magazine, and he has also authored the Sefer Halacha at Home, published by Art Scroll. To reach Rabbi Kerzner, please email, and I shared that with both WhatsApp groups. So with that, thank you so much, Rabbi Kerzner.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to join this Chesed group again on a Sunday morning. I think last time it was also in a morning. I think it was also a Sunday morning. And to get together to learn is an incredible thing. And it should be a schus that should help you and your families see Yeshuas v'nechamas and tremendous bracha v'nachas. And today I want to share with you a question that, truth be told, every single person grapples with. Some in more overt and perhaps extreme ways, some in maybe more nuanced ways, but I think every single person has to find the balance in this arena in some element of their life. So I'll just give you an example that came my way a couple of days ago. And as you'll see, it's something that finds itself at everyone's door at some point, inevitably throughout life. So someone came to me a couple of days ago and said that his wife was actually extremely upset. Why? He said they're a very well-to-do family here in Montreal, and there was a person that came to them a few weeks ago. They were making a chasna, and they needed financial help. Unfortunately, things were very rough, and they wanted some contribution in order to help offset the costs of the wedding. So they gave a significant amount towards the wedding of this person, and they were very happy to give. But when the actual wedding came and this woman who gave a significant amount attended the wedding, she was a little bit shocked by the fact that she felt it was an over-the-top wedding. She felt it was a little bit of a fancy wedding, and she felt, why am I being asked to contribute a significant sum towards a wedding that's beyond the pale? That's not the essentials. Have I been taken advantage of? Is this chesed or is it not chesed? If I want something, a tissue box, it's 15 feet away, and for you, it's 10 feet away. Is it proper for me to ask you to give me fetch that tissue box for me? And if you do it, are you doing a chesed? Maybe you're becoming a shmata. Maybe you're feeding into my dysfunction. Maybe you're enabling me to continue being an unhealthy person. This question has itself um, play out in so many different ways and in so many different arenas of life. I raise money for people in my shul every single Yom Tov season. And, there have been times that I've raised money and it's not easy going to people and getting money to help for the bare minimum of Yom Tov, to try to make Yom Tov for people who can't afford Yom Tov. And then you'll have a guy who I give money to before Yom Tov who had claimed to me that he needs Pasha basics in order to make the Yom Tov possible. And then they'll be bidding in shul for some kibud, for some aliyah, and then he'll be bidding. And he'll win the bid and win the auction for something that was completely beyond the essentials, right? You don't need to buy yourself a kibbutz and shul. And I'm there in the basement thinking, this is what I raised money for. And the question is this chesed or is this being taken advantage of? I know a woman who came to me and was very proud, and she told me that every single Yom Tif, her kids come from out of town, but there's not that much room. So what she does is she herself and her husband sleep by one of the neighbors for Yom Tif. so that one of her kids is able to take her bedroom and make use of the house. And again, she told me this very proudly, and I was thinking in my mind, is that the right message that you're sending to your kids? Is that really chesed? Is that being benevolent and kind and compassionate? Or is that maybe being taken advantage of? And is that a contradiction? What's chesed? What's dysfunction? That's my question today. Again, I give a shiur, right? And one of the shiurim I give, Baruch Hashem gets a nice packed room, and sometimes there's standing room only, many times. And one time I noticed, and then I saw it happen a bunch of times after that. There was a person, an older person, a scholar, sitting in the back, and he noticed someone come in. There was no seats for him. And the older fellow offered his seat to the younger fellow. The younger fellow was not a bigger scholar than him. He wasn't a more prestigious person. He was just a younger fellow. And the older one offered the younger one the seat. And I remember noticing it in the middle of this year and thinking, is that proper? What you just did? Is it chesed or is it maybe feeding into something unhealthy? And that's my question. I want to know where we draw the line. Where do we draw the line between chesed and being taken advantage of? Okay? So in my mind, I always thought that there's somewhat of a contradiction and there must be one way and one way only to reconcile it. And I still am going along that train of thought, but today I want to share with you what I think is an additional insight that helps clarify the broader picture of this question. Avram Avinu is looking for a shidduch for his holy son Yitzchak. He sends his servant, his faithful servant Eliezer, on a mission. Please find a shidduch for my son. He goes to Aram Naharaim and he devises a plan. He has a test to see who is worthy of entering the empire of Chesed of his master, Avram Avinu. So he decides to ask a maiden to draw water for him. And that's the test. If she offers water not just for him, but she also offers water for his 10 camels, clearly she's special. She's unique, and she's worthy of entering the house of Avram Avinu. He does this, and it's a successful test because Rivka passes it with flying colors. She comes, she offers to him water, she offers to his camels water, she offers to his servants water, and it works out beautifully. The test actually gets the proper assessment for a worthy candidate. Rivka Imenu enters Klal Yisrael. My question is, was that chesed? You have a 3-year-old girl who's being asked to schlep water for this huge burly guy who has a whole contingent of fully capable servants. In fact, you know how capable they are? The Medrash says that Besuel actually had a plan when Eliezer was not looking to kill Eliezer and take all of his assets for himself. He was going to do it together with Lavan, and they had a whole plan in place. And then what happened was that they noticed that Eliezer was walking, holding 2 camels like this with his 2 arms, and realized maybe he's not the right guy to mess with. Maybe we'll face our ire on a different victim because this guy is not going to be easy to take down. So clearly, Eliezer was super powerful. Okay? We're talking about a whole bunch of men who maybe were bodybuilders. Okay? These guys were extremely muscular, powerful, and I feel that this little Rivka is being taken advantage of. She's schlepping back and forth. Everyone's just sitting there like a golem, waiting for the water to be served to them. I don't know. Is this chesed? And yet, it seems to be so special of a chesed that it earns Rivka one of the holiest spots in history to enter the empire of Chesed of Avram Avinu. To me, this seems to imply very clearly that yes, on one hand, you might feel like you're being taken advantage of. Maybe you're a shmata in some regard, but it's a chesed and it's a mitzvah and it's something that earned Rivka the rights to be Rivka Imenu. That's one source. I think it's a pretty clear source that chesed is pretty broad. On the other hand, I seem to have a contradiction to this. There's a famous pasuk in Mishpatim which delineates a mitzvah regarding helping a person in trouble. So we're talking about, let's say, a person who you see who has a donkey that's struggling. Yeah, there's a burden on the donkey, it's too heavy. You want to know, am I mechuyev? Is it incumbent on me to help unload the person's donkey? It says the pasuk in Mishpatim, Azav Tazav Imai, help the guy. Help the guy unload his donkey. Okay? It's very stressful, it's very strenuous. Please help the guy. It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of chesed to help him. The kliyakar, and you have to see this kliyakar inside if you ever have a chance. It's just unbelievable if you look at the words verbatim. I'll quote you a couple of his words verbatim. Very, very powerful stuff. It says the kliyakar, what does it say? Azav tazav, help imoi, with him. Imoi means imoi, with him. Shouldn't it say azav tazav loi, help him? What does it mean azav tazav imoi? The imoi seems to be out of place. It says the kliyakar, from here you see a fundamental cornerstone of chesed. What does it mean to help the person? What does it mean to help the donkey with his burden? Says the kliyakar, it has to be azav, tazav, imoi, help imoi with him. That means he has to do his part in helping himself. But it says the kliyakar, if you have a guy who's suffering with a heavy burden, his car has a flat, whatever it is, and he wants your help, and he sits there on the sidelines saying to you, my dear fellow Jew, you have a mitzvah, get to work. Meaning, he doesn't try to help himself. He just unloads on you. Literally and figuratively. And he says, it's your mitzvah. Do your part in being mekayim the mitzvah of azev tazev. Says the kliyakar, that's inappropriate and that's not the mitzvah. It has to be azev tazev imoy with him. That means he can't be taking advantage of you. He has to be doing his part to try to help himself, and only then do you have a mitzvah to assist him and enable him to succeed in unloading his donkey. Continues the kliyakar with such a powerful and scary line. Again, I quote verbatim. Mikan toichachas negula lemiktsas ame amenu. This is a very sharp rebuke to certain people in our community that unfortunately have difficult financial struggles. Shematilim asman al hatzibur. Sometimes they throw their yoke on the community. They impose their situation on the community and they say, help me out. And sometimes they don't do their part in helping themselves. They could get a job. They could support themselves. They could take care of their needs. But they say, you know what? It's on you. You're the community. You take care of me. And says the kliyakar, that's not the mitzvah of chesed. It's a sharp rebuke to them, this pasuk. Because it says, azav tazav imoy, it has to be with them. They have to do their part in helping themselves. This kliyakar clearly seems to indicate that it's not chesed if a person is taking advantage of you. Again, back to my case. You have someone who's asking for assistance and they really could get a job. They're clearly capable. You even know, which is many times the case by me when I'm trying to get a job for someone, and you know that they have the opportunity, they turned it down because of whatever, maybe silly, maybe not so silly reason that you maybe didn't fully agree with. And then they need financial help, and now they want your financial help, or they want you to raise money on their behalf. This kliyakar seems to indicate, wait a second, aziv taziv imoi. If you're not helping yourself, I'm feeding into your dysfunction by helping you. I'm not helping you. I'm actually prolonging your agony because you obviously need help, not physically, but emotionally. I don't know. You have a problem, and I'm feeding into it by giving to you. And that's my question. Is this not a contradiction? By Rivka, Chazal seem to imply clearly that it is a chesed. And Rivka was being taken advantage of, at least at bird's eye view, that's what it seemed. And yet it was considered chesed. And yet we have a Kliyakar that seems to contradict this. The Kliyakar seems to say that Aziv Ta'aziv Imai is a cornerstone and a foundation of chesed. It has to be Imai, he has to be doing his part. And only then is it a chesed for you to assist him. Which one is it? I think the answer is a very important idea, but I'm going to buttress it with an insight from the Shlach HaKadosh that's a life transformative insight. So I always knew this contradiction, and in my heart, I always felt that the answer was as follows. And I still am going along this train of thought, but I'm just going to add on an additional insight to the picture today. I think the answer is that it depends on whose vantage point we're talking about. When the Kliyakar rebukes and admonishes Miktsas Aniye Amenu, some of the poor people, he gives them sharp rebuke for coming on to the tzibur, coming on to the community, coming on to others when they could help themselves. His rebuke is not directed at the donor, at the benefactor. His rebuke is directed at the ani, meaning if you know you're taking advantage of people, it's inappropriate for you to ask them for help. If you're not doing your part to help yourself, don't come on to other people. He's addressing the needy one. And he's saying, don't take advantage of people. It's not chesed if you're taking advantage of people. When we say that Rivka was deemed a candidate for the empire of chesed of Avram Avinu, for her story of chesed, even though it seemed like she was being taken advantage of, it's because in that case, when we're addressing the donor, the giver, the Baal Chesed or Bavas Chesed, in that case, it's a different story because even though it's possible that the person might be taking advantage of you, you always have to give the person the benefit of the doubt. You never know what's going on with the person. If you're a wealthy, well-to-do person and the person's collecting for a wedding and then you come to the wedding and it's fancier than you would have anticipated, the first thing to do is don't judge the person. You don't really know what's going on. So I think that the answer might be that it depends on whose vantage point we're addressing. When it comes to the ani himself, Hazav Tazav Imai, make sure you're not taking advantage of people. When you're the donor, so it depends. If you know for sure you're being taken advantage of, if it's super clear to you, then yeah, it's not chesed. As the Kliyakar says, Hazav Tazav Imai. If you know for sure that someone's taking advantage and it's unhealthy and you're feeding into it, then don't do the chesed. It's not chesed. All you're doing is prolonging his suffering and his dysfunction. But when you have a doubt, when it's unclear, 100%, it's the optimal mitzvah of chesed to help the person because you never know. I remember I was once talking to Rabbi Reisman, who's a well-known Rav in Flatbush. He was telling me that he was once in Eretz Yisrael for the summer. So he goes every single year for the summer to Israel to learn. And he happened to be in Tzfat one day. So he's sitting there in Tzfat in a Beis Medrash learning, because that's what he does every single year in the summer. And there was a fellow who walked in. There was a fellow who walked in and was collecting money. So he comes over to Rabbi Reisman. He gives him a little bit, nothing too substantial. So Rabbi Reisman tells him, he says, I have a very good idea for you. You see, just a block down, you have a stop where all of the tours from all parts of Israel reach their destination for Tzvat in that area. And if you go there, you will be making hundreds and hundreds of dollars a day because there's tons of groups who all come to Tzvat at their very juncture, and that's your hotspot. You go there, and you'll have so many people to go to because that's exactly where they all come to when they're trying to get to Tzvat. So the person listened to him for a second, turned to him, and he said, I hear what you're saying, but I'd much more prefer being here in an air-conditioned base medrash. And Rabbi Reisman said that for a second after he was told this, he was like, what is wrong with this guy? I'm telling you, you can make hundreds of dollars a day, maybe thousands of dollars a day. There's tons and tons of Jews at that stop where all the bus stops basically converge. And you're telling me you're coming to a base medrash with two or three people because there's air conditioning there. What's wrong with you? And then he realized that it's not something wrong that I shouldn't help him. It's he obviously has something wrong, meaning there's maybe a physical impediment, or maybe a mental impediment, or maybe an emotional. There's something. The person has a chayli. He has a machlet. There's something dysfunctional, and I have a mitzvah of chesed just because there's something blocking him. There's a blockage. So you never know what's going on inside the person because maybe there's a weakness that's hindering his ability to take care of himself. And that's my point here when I talk about two different vantage points. When you're approached to do chesed, if you don't know for sure that it's being taken advantage of, then yes, it's a mitzvah of chesed because you can't judge the person. You never know what's going on inside. You never know what's going on behind the scenes. But I want to take it a step further. I want to share with you an astounding Shloah HaKadosh, and I think it's a life-transforming Shloah HaKadosh if we could absorb it, if we could inhale it, if we could imbibe it into our neshama. So again, I'm telling you that if it seems like the person's taking advantage of you, but you don't know, so if you could address it and clarify, because hey, that's really the best thing to do in that situation. But if there is no way to determine and assess clearly whether the person truly is in need, give the person the benefit of the doubt and do the chesed for him. But what if it bothers you? What if it irks you? This person, I don't know if they're taking advantage of it, but it doesn't seem like they really need the chesed. It seems like they could help themselves. Why am I raising money for the person? I think they can get a job. I would advise perhaps every single one of us to always keep this Shloah HaKadosh at the forefront of our mind. So here's the Shloah HaKadosh. There are two things in the Torah. There are two things that Chazal stress about Avram Avinu. That according to the eyes of Chazal, grant Avram Avinu the eternal status of being the paragon of Chesed, the Ish Chesed in the Torah. And both of these stories that exemplify and demonstrate to the world Avram's Chesed, both seem to be very questionable stories. Number one, the famous story of Kindnessor Aryeh. He greets guests, he welcomes them in. Okay, beautiful thing. And he feeds them food. Now, tell me for a second, was that a major chesed that he had that story of Kindnessor Aryeh with the three angels who he thought perhaps were three Arabs? Well, they didn't need to eat. It wasn't really a chesed because food wasn't something that was necessary for them at any cost, in any situation. A malach doesn't need to eat, and yet that's like the prime example of Avram Avinu being the model of chesed for humanity. And my question is, I'm not interested. I want you to give me an example of Avram Avinu taking an orphan and saving their life. Taking a kala, making a wedding, finding a shidduch, doing something monumental for someone. The one example of Avram Avinu's quintessential chesed is the chesed he does that's not even necessary. There was no lacking, there was no deficiency, there was a malach who didn't need to eat, he gave him food. That's the spitz, that's the prime model of chesed in the Torah. That to me is bothersome. It's troublesome. Why in heaven's name is that used as the prime example of chesed in the Torah? Number one. Number two, That's the Torah itself. The Medrash then goes and says something also that blows my mind. The Medrash says Avraham Avinu was deemed to be the quintessential Baal Chesed, right? He was the man, the paragon of Chesed. Why? Says the Medrash, he went and he buried his wife Sarah when she passed. Really? That's what makes you a special Baal Chesed? You bury your spouse? I don't know. I would hope that everyone here, everyone watching, everyone listening would be expected to do such basic chesed for their spouse. That's such a major, major accomplishment in chesed that deems you worthy of representing humanity in chesed. I think it's expected to bury your spouse. So why is it that that is on a pedestal, so to speak, in the world of chesed? That's my question. The two examples, both one from the Torah, one from Chazal, from the Medrash, about Avram Avinu's major, transformative, monumental chesed, both cases seem to be severely lacking in my mind. That's my question. So I'll share with you what the Shlach HaKadosh says in answering this question. Why did Hashem create the world? Hashem didn't need to create the world. Hashem didn't lack anything. Hashem wasn't deficient in any way. Hashem was perfect. So why did he need to create the world? He was just doing fine without the world. The pasuk says, "Olam Chesed Yibaneh." The reason why Hashem created us, created mankind, is because Olam Chesed Yibaneh, part and parcel of that Chesed is the desire or the need. I guess it's a little bit controversial today in the world. Does Hashem need us? Not need us? I'm not getting into that. Part and parcel of being perfect is the desire to bestow that chesed, that goodness, on others. So why did Hashem create the world? Because he's perfect. And part of perfection is to be mative to others. That's why he created the world. So asks the Ramchal, ask the Rishonim the obvious question. If it's true that the only reason why Hashem created the world is to give us taiv, meaning, what does that mean? To put us in this world so that we could earn our ticket in Olam Haba. So really the end goal is he wanted to give us Olam Haba. And the vehicle through which we could earn our Olam Haba is by living in this world and performing mitzvahs and doing good things. That's the purpose of the world. If that's the case, save me all the trouble. Create me specifically to be thrown into Olam Haba. Why give me the trials and tribulations of an earthly life? Okay, it's devastating. It's gruesome. It's sometimes atrocious. And you're making me live this existence so that I can earn my good spots in Olam Haba. I'd much more prefer being created specifically to be thrown into Olam Haba. So why did Hashem put us in this difficult world? Ramchal famously says, because of the concept called Nama de Kisufa, which means really the purpose of the creation is Hashem is perfect and he wanted therefore to bestow the perfection on others, to give to others, to be mative imabrias. But he couldn't put us directly in the world to come, in Olam Haba, because it would be shameful. It's like feeling like a nitzrach, that you're taking a hand-me-out. It doesn't feel good. When the recipient is taking a hand-me-out, he feels ashamed. It's humiliating. And therefore, if Hashem would just throw us straight in Olam Haba, it wouldn't feel real. The chesed would be lacking. And therefore, in order to make it a perfect chesed, what he did was, he said, I'm going to put you in this world where there's a challenge, where there's Yetzer Hara, where there's trials and tribulations, and you're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to decide on your own volition to do good. You're going to have Bechira. And when you make that good choice, the good is yours. You're like God, where you create and decide on your own to do good. And in that way, when you earn the Olam Haba after this world's over, it actually feels real. It feels earned, it feels a part of you, and it's a perfect chesed. So the reason why Hashem put us here is so that v'halachta b'drachav, we emulate Hashem, we do chesed in Hashem's way, we do taiv in Hashem's way by choosing taiv, And in that way, we earn our ticket to Olam Haba. And that's the whole point of creation. Therefore, says the Shlach Kaddish, something astounding. It comes out that the entire purpose of creation is v'halachta b'drachav, to choose good. And in that way, earn our ticket to Olam Haba in a real way, where it's earned, where it feels good, where it's a perfect chesed. V'halachta b'drachav means doing like Hashem, being native as part and parcel of our essence, because that's what Hashem is. Hashem created the world, olam chesed yiboneh, because part of perfection, even though there's no lacking, part of perfection is to be native and do good for others. That's why, says the Shlah, and says the Alter of Slobodka, who has a beautiful piece about this. When Chazal want to shine a light on Avram Avinu's chesed, it's the burial of his wife. Chesed you do with your spouse. Shouldn't that be self-evident? Shouldn't that be axiomatic that you're expected to do chesed with your spouse? The answer is true, but that's why it's the perfect chesed. You see, when I do chesed with my spouse, that chesed is the one chesed that doesn't have nama de kisufa, doesn't have that shame of feeling like I'm taking a hand-me-out. Because when you have not just a spouse, when you have a close family member, your children, when they get chesed from you, because it's expected, they don't feel shame. So it's a perfect chesed. So the chesed you do with your spouse and your close family members is supreme chesed, because it's most similar to Hashem's chesed, where he does chesed in a way where the person doesn't feel shame, where you have to earn your reward, because when it's nama de kisufa, when it's shameful, when it feels like a hand-me-out, it's lacking in the chesed. So the highest level of chesed is the chesed you do with family. Why? There's no nama de kisufa. It's expected. And when it's expected, it's a perfect chesed, because then they don't feel shame in taking the chesed. The Shlach Kaddish and the Alter of Slobodka both say that's why, people don't know this, but that's why in halacha, when there's a kedima, an order of priority in giving out tzedakah, family comes first. First is family, afterwards is community, Eretz Yisrael. There are different priorities, hierarchies in the laws of tzedakah. And some people think, many people think, that the reason why family comes first in the laws of tzedakah is because you have a responsibility to your family. And since you have more of a responsibility to your family than your friends, your family comes first. And that's certainly true, but it's much deeper than that. It says the Alter of Slobodka, it's also because, on a deeper level, the chesed you do with your family is on the highest level. Because there's no nama de kisufa, there's no shame. They expect you to help them. And therefore there's less shame, and therefore it's a perfect chesed. It doesn't feel like a hand-me-out. That's why it's the highest level of chesed. So it's not just because you have a responsibility to family. It's because it's chesed most similar to God. It's godly chesed, which doesn't come with nama de kisufa. It's the most supreme fulfillment of the mitzvah of halachta b'drachav, emulating, mimicking, replicating the behavior of God. Which brings us to my next point. Says the Shlah, that's why. When the Torah highlights how Avram Avinu was the paragon of chesed, it gives us the story of his achnasis orchim with 3 angels who he thought were 3 Arabs. You see, we dafka wanted to highlight a case of chesed that didn't even have a recipient. There wasn't even a beneficiary. The angels didn't need to eat. Why? Because the Torah is trying to teach you, you know what a true Baal Chesed is? You know what Avram Avinu represented? Godly Chesed. It's more about what it does for you, the giver, than what it does for the recipient, for the beneficiary. So I'm going to highlight that by saying the prime Chesed in the Torah is a Chesed that didn't even have a recipient. There wasn't an Nitzrach. There was no beneficiary. There were angels that didn't need to eat. You know why? Chesed is about what it does for you. It makes you a godly person. It fulfills v'halachta b'drachav. It's like you representing and being an ambassador of God who gives because that's who you are. It's your essence. Olam chesed yibana, Hashem created the world not because there was a beneficiary. There wasn't a needy nitzrach asking for it. It's because part and parcel of Hashem's perfection is to be meitiv, and that's the example of Chesed in the Torah, where Hashem says, Avram, you represent my Chesed, give. And when you give, it's more about what you're doing for yourself and your essence and what you're transforming than when it is doing to the recipient. And that's why specifically the example in the Torah of Chesed is Chesed done when there was no nitzrach. In fact, the Shlach HaKadosh continues and says that maybe explains why the example wasn't just the chesed with angels that didn't need it, who didn't really have a nitzrach. There was no beneficiary because angels don't need to eat, but even more than that. Why, out of all of the examples and arenas of chesed, did the Torah choose to highlight Avram's chesed with a chesed of Achnasas Orchim, welcoming guests? Why is that mitzvah unique? In that it gets the highlight, the spotlight of chesed in the Torah. Well, if chesed at its core is about emulating Hashem and becoming a Bal Chesed like Hashem, who created the world, because part of his essence of perfection is to be meitiv to others, and that's what Chesed's about on a profound and deep level, then maybe the perfect example is not just Chesed done to a malach, but it's also Hachnasas Orchim specifically. Because Hashem is the ultimate Machnis Aryeh. You see, Hashem created a world, and Hashem is basically the host of this world, and we're guests. We're just here for a little bit, hoping to earn our spot in Eilam Haba. Do we feel like guests? I don't know. Some of us are building big mansions. Some of us are spending millions of dollars on shuls and stuff, schools. I think we feel maybe sometimes, unfortunately, quite comfortable in this world. You know why? Because Hashem does the most incredible Hachnasas Orchim in that he makes us feel as home. He makes us, the guests, feel like it's our home. When you have a guest that eats breakfast at your table, takes cereal, milk thing, and he leaves it on the table, in a way, maybe it's a little rude, but in a way, it means you're doing Hachnasas Orchim really exceptionally well because they feel so comfortable that it's their home that they leave the food on the table. That's what we're doing in Hashem's home. We have a world that's hosting us, and we feel like Balabatim here. We feel like it's our place. Maybe that's why the example in the Torah of Avram's Chesed, done to mimic Hashem's Chesed, is Achnasas Orchim. Because Hashem is the prime example of a Machnis Orch. He does Achnasas Orchim in the most exceptional way you could imagine. And that's why, specifically that mitzvah is the best way to fulfill V'halachta b'drachav in emulating Hashem's Chesed. Because Hashem's prime Chesed is actually Hachnasas Orchim. Our very existence in this world is a form of Hashem's Hachnasas Orchim. So if we're talking about Chesed that is meant to show us how to mimic Hashem's Chesed, the perfect example of that would be specifically the Chesed of Hachnasas Orchim. Which is why, I'll tell you something fascinating. I'm basically at my final point, but I just want to highlight one more point. Reb Chaim Kanievsky used to say that if a person unfortunately was suffering from infertility issues, they should specifically be mekabel on themselves to do Hachnasas Orchim. That's like a major skula to have children when physically difficult. And I want to know why. Why is that the skula to have children? It's like a random skula, if you ask me. Hachnasas Orchim. Why specifically Hachnasas Orchim? I'll tell you why. If you want to know if there's one mitzvah in the Torah, and this is incredible if you think about it, if there's one mitzvah in the Torah that connects to supernatural creation, it's Hachnasas Orchim. Sarah wasn't able to have children for many years. In fact, she didn't even have a womb. Like she physically didn't have the kalim to have children. And what happened? She did Hachnasas Orchim. Bam, she had a child. What happened a little later? Elisha, right? Elisha first, before him, his Rabbi Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi was greeted and welcomed as a guest. Someone did Hachnasas Orchim. This Isha Hatzorfatit, this woman who hosted him, and then she had a child miraculously, and then the child died, and then who resurrected him supernaturally? Eliyahu Hanavi. All right after she did Hachnasas Orchim. Further on, his disciple, Elisha, same story. Isha Hashunamis welcomed him as a guest, did Hachnasas Orchim, and then all of a sudden she earned supernatural fertility. She was able to have a child, and then the child died, and then he was Mechaya Mesim. Tchias HaMesim, specifically after Hachnasas Orchim. Is that not astounding? Every time you find Tchias HaMesim by a human being in the Torah, or the ability to have children supernaturally, it all comes right after the person performed Hachnasas Orchim. Why? It's because Hachnasas Orchim is the prime way to model Hashem's Chesed. Hashem is the ultimate Machnas Oirich. And when you mimic Hashem's Chesed, you become godly. Only God has the Kayach of Tchias HaMesim, the Gemara says. He has the Mafteach of being able to have children. That's something only God could do. You access the divine. You access the godly spirit of humanity, of life, of Tchias HaMesim, through doing Hashem's Chesed, Hachnasas Orchim. And that says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, is why I always recommend children to be born for people who have infertility problems by being Mekayim, by fulfilling the mitzvah of Hachnasas Orchim. Because it's the prime way of modeling and replicating and emulating the chesed that Hashem does with us on earth. What's my point here? My point is that we began with somewhat of a contradiction. Chesed, not chesed. When do we decide when the person's taking advantage of us? When do we decide that it's actual chesed? On one hand, you have Rivka, who is endorsed for her chesed, when it feels like she was being taken advantage of, a 3-year-old schlepping and doing the hard, stressful labor on behalf of these burly, fully capable physical men. Yet it was deemed a worthy chesed of entering the empire of chesed of Avram Avinu, which seems to indicate that it is chesed when you make yourself into a shmata. And on the other hand, you find azev tazev imai. The Kli Yakar says it has to be imai. If it's not imai, it's not chesed. Well, I said the answer must be that it depends on whose vantage point we're talking about. If we're talking about the advantage of the ani, don't take advantage of people. If you're taking advantage of people, you're doing something harmful to yourself and dangerous for your well-being. Don't take advantage of people. But if you're the donor, you're the one being approached, and you're being asked to contribute, to do chesed, give the person the benefit of the doubt. You never know what's going on. There could be some macha, some disease, some inner dysfunction that you don't know about. As long as you don't know you're feeding into the dysfunction, give the person the benefit of the doubt. But what if it's difficult? What if it's hard? I feel like this person doesn't really need the chesed. The person can get a job. The person, why should I do the chesed? The answer is, chesed's more about what you're doing for yourself than what you're doing for them. Chesed, as the Shlach Kodesh, is about Avram's chesed, where there wasn't even a beneficiary. It's about you mimicking Hashem. When you mimic Hashem, you do chesed because of who you are, not because of what you're doing for the person. So maybe not, the person needs it. I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going on with the person. But you know what? Chesed's about me transforming into a godly figure. And when I mean a godly figure, I mean doing chesed because it's part and parcel of your essence. It's part of your DNA. It's part of your mahus. You do chesed because that's who you are as a godly representative, as a godly ambassador. And when you view chesed in that light, it becomes easy to do the chesed because you're not judging about the exact beneficiary's needs. You're judging about whether or not I am becoming more godly with this initiative. Now, if a person's taking advantage of you and it's not chesed, maybe it's not a good thing to do because it's not godly. You're not helping the person, you're hurting the person. But if you don't know that to be the case, and to you it's just, should I do the chesed when I don't know for sure if the person needs me? The answer is, the Malachim didn't need Avram. And yet he did the chesed because chesed is more about what you do for you than what you do for the person. Thank you so much for listening, and you should continue to have so many zchuyos in the learning that you do, in the getting together that you do, and in the growth that you do. Thank you for listening. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi Kerzner. Thank you. I'd like to if it's okay if we can open it up for a few questions, because there's a lot of questions. First of all, someone asked, and I'd like you to address it. Somebody said, can you recircle back to that over the top wedding? Now, given everything that you taught
Right.
and all the different perspectives, how would you answer somebody
So,
that came to you?
okay, that's an excellent question. So what I think is as follows. For instance, in the case that my second example, I'll get that back to the first example in a second. The second example where I raised money for 10 families in my shul who need help for Yom Tov, and then one of them was outbidding everyone for a kibbud for the shul. In that case, I felt that it was imperative for me to address it with the person because of the relationship, because it's my responsibility. So what I'm saying is that if it's something that you could address to clarify if the person's taking advantage of you, then that is the prudent action, I think, that you want to make sure that the person's not taking advantage. But what if it's not feasible? What if the person, like in this case, if there's a wedding, I say don't judge. Maybe it was the bechutin who paid the extra money, right? Maybe it was the other side. So what I'm saying is if it's very easily verifiable if the person doesn't need it and they're taking advantage of you, right? And they're scamming you basically, then you should be judicious about it, and you should actually find out and verify: Am I being scammed? Am I being taken advantage of? What I'm saying is that if it's not practical, then you never know what's going on. It's very easy to make judgments, but it's very hard to really assess the deeper inner workings of other people. So that's my point. My point is, yes, if it's clear, then it's Azay Tazavimai. But if it's not clear, then I think that the Chesed is still a tremendous mitzvah, and Adrabah, then it's more godly because it's about what you're doing for yourself than what you're doing for the person. So I think there's a fine line. Again, getting back to my examples, you have a person who stands up for a person younger than them in a shir and gives them their chair, or they're on the bus and I don't think that's a proper thing. I think that's weird. If the person's like maybe an older person, of course. If the person's a Rav, a Talmid Chacham, of course. But regular, I don't think that's a healthy dynamic, right? So you have to know which case is a healthy dynamic, which case is not. My point is just if you don't know, you should give the benefit of the doubt.
So I want to bring something up because you can bring in another point about that. Let's say with the wedding, right? Let's say a person has X amount of money to give. Let's say you don't know exactly what the situation is. Maybe it's the pressure, maybe it's the this, maybe the girl was crying, maybe she wants this, right? All these different things that you don't understand why they made a wedding like this, right? But on the other hand, what if you have a certain amount of money to give away, right? And
Yeah.
therefore, you can say, you're doing it for yourself, of course, because
Right.
every bit of tzedakah that we do is really so that Hashem
Right.
can give us good,
Right.
right? We can't receive good unless Hashem gives us the opportunities to do good. So
Right.
He can give us good. But there's so many variables that you can look at. Like, what about there's a certain amount of money that you give out?
100%. 100%. So if let's say, as you're correctly pointing out, you do have to take into account the fact that this person last time made a fancy wedding, right? So even though I don't know, if someone else at the same time is coming to me and I have a limited amount of funds that I have to give to a wedding, and one person I know for sure needs it, and one person I don't know, so um, for sure maybe the priority would be to the person needs it.
But
But it
isn't
doesn't
there
mean you
also
shouldn't give. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't give also a little bit or something
right?
to the other person. Now, it means you would have to make a judgment call. But my point is just that you shouldn't judge a person because from your vantage point, it may seem one way, but it's not necessarily that way. Now, but at the end of the day, if you have someone else that's clearly in dire straits, then it's already in Shulchan Aruch that they have kedima, right? The Shulchan Aruch says if someone's in dire straits and they don't have enough for the bare essentials, then for sure it's prudent to give them first. Yeah.
You also mentioned that the mitzvah of Kindnessor, right? That was the mitzvah that was given in order to, because that's really the essence of godliness. That's the mitzvah. But what if, Rabbi Kerzner, what if certain people are better at some mitzvahs and are weaker in other mitzvahs? We live in a different world today, right? It's not like black and white anymore. Society has been changing, thinking is changing, people are changing, people are weaker in some areas, stronger in other areas.
Yeah.
What if for somebody, Hachnasas Archim is the easiest mitzvah to do, and for somebody else, right, Hachnasas Archim is the most difficult mitzvah to do. So you see what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yeah.
how would you compare that then?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. That's a very good question. And you're really asking a general question, which is, my point was just that Achnasas Archim has a special skula, and it's in a certain way, it's a super divine mitzvah as opposed to other mitzvahs that don't have that special characteristic, which, is objectively a point, right? Now you're asking a different point, and that is, how does that go into the decision-making process of a person who maybe excels at other areas, right?
Well, let's say two women have the same inyan of infertility. One is unbelievable in Achnasas Archim. It's easy for her. So when she does that mitzvah, it's simple for her. It's not like she's going out of her way. Right. But the other woman, for her, it's very, very difficult mitzvah. So when she's doing it, so for the woman who actually it's so easy for, there might why would you say right?
Right. No, I understand your question. You're saying, why is it fair that the one who will get the skula has it easy?
I'm not just saying that. Wouldn't it make more sense for the woman who it's so easy for to do a mitzvah that's more difficult for her?
I hear, yeah, so definitely. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that there happens to be a special characteristic about Achnasas Archim. 100%. If you want to go out of your way to show Hashem your Mesiras Nefesh, then do something else in addition. You should. You should definitely do something. That person would do something else in addition. But my point is just that there is a special divine characteristic to Achnasas Archim. But for sure, you're 100% right that you're supposed to get yourself out of the comfort zone to show some Mesiras Nefesh.
Right. And there's just one more thing.
Hashem, next time, if I remember, this topic that you're actually touching on is a topic that I've actually thought about a lot, and maybe next time I can give a shir on it, and that is the question, which is a general question of another contradiction, actually. Do I focus in my life on the things that I naturally am good at and just try to perfect them and hone it? Or is my tafkid to take the things I'm naturally not good at and work on them? There seems to be a lot of contradictions about this. So maybe in the future we could address this, but that's definitely a good question, which you were hinting at or alluding to, and that is, how do you take into account things that you're naturally strong at and things that you're naturally weak at, which is a good question.
So I want to open it up, but just one more thing before I open it up to a few more questions. And that is, when you brought in Avram Avinu and the concept of bearing his wife, you brought in all those meforshim, et cetera, and you also brought in the fact when he had the bris milah, the whole thing with that of giving up. But could it be a possibility also, Rabbi Kerzner, that Chesed was much cleaner then? That the idea of Chesed was simpler, because as we have evolved as a world, right? The whole idea that you're asking the question, is someone taking advantage of you or not taking advantage of you? Maybe was it a time that wasn't an inyan, and therefore because the Chesed was so much pure, was so much cleaner, those were the examples that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave. You see what I'm trying to say? It's much, the lines today are much more blurred because there are so many variables today, right? We have so many different variables.
Life is certainly more complicated today.
Right.
There's no question. I do think that this question has got to be an eternal question that people have grappled with in some way, shape, or form. And that is trying to decipher and trying to assess real needs, fake needs. Life in general is much, much more complicated today. So this question has been amplified, right? And we're grappling with this question at every single nook and every single corner of our life. But I don't think it's a new question. I just think lives have taken on a whole new level of complexity
Uh-huh.
and nuance. We live in a world of nuance. That's really what you're saying, which is true. But I don't think that it was super clear back then. I think it was always a question of real need versus fake need versus living up to the Joneses type of need, right?
Right. But it's also, there's so many variables, it's all relative.
So we just had there's a meeting always with Rabbanim and trying to make certain guidelines. So one of the questions was just to highlight what you're saying. One of the questions was, should we stop? They should make a takana that schools shouldn't give breaks on tuition if the person has a summer home. This is a very controversial question, right? Because some people argue, what do you mean? I'm in Montreal. A lot of people have summer homes because they need something to do in the summer. There's nothing here, so it's a necessity. So why shouldn't I get a break on the tuition because I have a summer home? The reason why I have a summer was because of necessity. Others are saying, well, that's a luxury. What's a necessity? What's a luxury? Right?
Mhm.
Sending your child to Israel for a seminary, is that a luxury or is that a necessity? These are questions for our generation, which is what you're highlighting, that the complexity is skyrocketing today because of the comparison type of thinking.
But it's also maybe that's why maybe the examples that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us were much more simplistic, because Chesed was more simplistic. That's my point, that it wasn't just, though it was also coming to the points
Right.
that Chesed
Yeah.
was so much purer then. It
Right.
was so much more simplistic, and it was
Right.
rooted in purity.
Right. But I mean, I think the point is still that Hashem could have gave us a much more powerful story of Chesed to highlight Avram's Chesed, right?
Right,
Him taking
right,
an orphan and taking care of him, which is probably what he did thousands of times.
right, right. But maybe he understood that maybe it was also Hashem's Chesed that he showed us that form of Chesed, right?
To show us
Meaning that showing us that even that level of Chesed is
right.
Chesed.
I mean, that's part of what I was saying, that he's showing
Right,
us that Chesed had the main part of Chesed is in your bones, in your heart,
right,
and not necessarily, helping the situation.
right. Okay, does anybody have a question? There are some questions that were written in the chat. Does anybody want to raise their hand and ask any questions? Anybody? Someone asked, they laughed, now that we know the benefits, can we up our game of this mitzvah in order to ask Hashem to do Tchias HaMetim for kids who are giving up on Torah learning? Oh,
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, that's a very actually powerful idea. That is a form of Kriyas HaMesim, and yeah.
Naomi, I'd love to ask a question if I can.
go ahead, Adele. Go ahead, please.
So I guess I have two questions here. Kind of, the question of if you're giving chesed and it doesn't like match your values, kind of going back to the over the top wedding, is that okay or not? Like, the idea of, I can't remember exactly, but we do know from the Torah, like that a slave is supposed to be treated a certain way if they're used to it. Like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, what is that towards us? Are we supposed to should that person have asked before they gave the money to the wedding, like, what is this being used for, and gotten more, details, so that she could say yes or no, like after the fact she didn't, and then maybe you live and you learn, but it does come back to, if we have certain values, like
100%. Yeah.
that, am I learning from that? I would feel terrible if I gave that money and I saw what it was being used for, when kind of going back to what Naomi was saying, what could I have done with it?
Yeah. You're 100% right that I think most people um, on this phone call, on the Zoom call, 100% would feel the same way. I think that's the normal thing to feel, which is I was taken advantage of. The Ramosha Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, in a tshuva about tzedakah writes that even though there's a whole priority and hierarchy in Hilchot Tzedakah, at the end of the day, that's just a preference. Halachically, it's your money, and you should give to whatever speaks to your heart. So, in terms of how you feel about distributing your money, you have 100% jurisdiction on that and license to give wherever um, your heart directs you. So, in terms of yes, you should a person should give to wherever they feel comfortable. That's A. You made the money. I mean, Hashem gave it to you, but it's yours for a reason, and Hashem's trusting you with this money, and therefore you should speak to whatever your heart feels strongly for. That being said, getting to this case, I think that I don't know what type of questions that the person posed. There's a certain limit to how much you could probe on a person's personal wedding that they're making. What are you going to ask? Like, how many piece wedding? Like, it's hard to get into the kishkas of the wedding if you're being approached to the wedding. I don't know, but yeah, you should be judicious. You should be careful. You should be cautious, and you should ask questions if you can. My point is just that yes, you should be careful, but you should also not judge people. And obviously, it's not easy. If you come to a wedding and you feel like it's fancy and you contributed to the wedding, it's not going to feel good. But I think that you should try to speak to yourself and feel about how you did a mitzvah because you don't know what's going on the other side, and you've become a more godly person as a result. So there were really 2 points. Number one, don't judge, you don't know. And number two, you transformed as a result of your chesed, right? So I think those two things are a chizik for you. Now,
Right.
going into it in the first place, you should try to be judicious. I think that if you can, you should ask a couple of questions.
Adele, can I just interject for 1 second?
Yeah, I just wanted to
want to
ask.
bring out a point before you go into the next question. Rabbi Kerzner, her point given, can't we also say that maybe Hashem puts us in these situations to be greater givers, even in difficulties like this? Because that's really the way Hashem is. Most of us live
100%.
excessively.
Well, that's what
Most
Rabbi
of us-
Kerzner has been saying.
Right,
That's his
most of us,
point.
right,
But-
1 second.
Right, but
Most
I
of
have
us,
right.
1 second, SD. Most of us live excessively, right? Most of us don't really understand the purpose of the money that we're given. And if you look at the world we live in, most people live very excessively. So maybe on some level, the excess that we're seeing is really a mirror. And Hashem is saying, just as I am giving you things excessively, right? Maybe the opportunity is for us to be able to also, and I'm not saying to give in those situations, because you have to use chokhmah, right?
Yeah.
But it's also a lesson for us
100%.
to realize, to go beyond our human constricted thinking,
Right.
or the exact.
No, it's a very beautiful point. Yes, 100%. I'll tell you, I have this is just an example. These examples come up, I'm sure, in your lives all the time. Someone came to me, in my shul. I try to help out when I feel there's a need. Someone said they're making a wedding and they don't have this money. Can I raise money? So I started to raise money, and it was actually going very well. And I enlisted someone else to help me to get a certain amount, and I'll cover the rest in terms of raising. And the person came to me afterwards, like after we already started, we were already $10,000 in, and the person said, just letting you know that the chassan has been working for a whole bunch of years now, and I think it's a six-figure job. So maybe the parents are asking you to help with the money, but it's not. It's like it's a wedding. The the chassan himself, who's been, yeah, it's not like he just came out of, he's been working for many years. He could pay for himself. Obviously, when I heard that, I was like starting to think, am I doing this for a need? Or am I setting up this person's future that's not right. You can't go to people and collect the money. This is a question. This is a question that comes up all the time.
Adele, you want to finish off your next question?
It's the same question. I mean, I guess, to me, I would really struggle with this, especially because of some of the things that we've talked about, which is keeping up with the Joneses. Like, if
Yeah.
someone can't afford and they're doing a fancy wedding, they're only making it worse for so many other people, especially since we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And I think it's a terrible message that they were able to, that I contributed to that. That's how, like, to me, it's like shows how bad it's gotten. It's not just that I need money for tuition, that you can not have money and then go and do that and make everyone else think that this is the norm. Like, I don't
Right.
know. I
Right.
feel
Well,
very
yeah.
strongly about that.
No. So
I wouldn't feel good about giving at all. I would feel horrible. I'd be so upset,
right. No. And that's normal. That's the normal way of reacting. What I would say is that for sure, lechatchila, you try to avoid such a situation. Meaning, if you're the giver, if you could avoid giving to a person who's going to make a fancy, in other words, if you could try to determine beforehand what's going to be, that's the best. I'm talking about you gave and you came to the wedding. So obviously the natural reaction is to get very frustrated, as you're describing, right?
Also, Rabbi Kerzner, also, can we also say, to add into another piece into this, that the fact that we are living the way we're living is almost causing this pressure amongst people who have less to have to live the same way that everyone else is living.
Sure.
You can take this to so many levels. You can really take this and say, you know what? Maybe this is something, yes, this is tzedakah, but maybe this is something that we can internally look at from such a deeper level. Like, should we be living like this? Should we be causing this pressure out in the world that weddings are being made like this so other people feel that they have to also make weddings like this? Like, there's so many levels. And I just want to say one more thing. I'll never forget, I ran an organization to feed the poor in Toronto for many, many years. And I remember in the beginning, before we gave out money, we used to give out boxes of food. And people used to give me money. And people used to say, well, why don't you give people noodles instead of this? And my answer was always, do you think that they deserve to have noodles because you have more money than them and therefore you're going to dictate what they have to eat?
Right.
And I said, is that real chesed? Isn't chesed giving somebody what they need, not what you think they need? Of course, within the boundaries. I'm not saying that people have the right to do those things within the boundaries, but I think that these questions that you're posing and this Torah that you're giving really is much deeper for all of us to take a look at how maybe we're taking advantage of what Hashem is giving us.
Right.
And maybe how we're causing a climate out there that is more difficult for people because of the way we're living. And who's to say, Rabbi Kerzner, like, we all dive into Kodesh Baruch Hu and say, help me. Should we say to Hashem, but only help me, that I don't live excessively?
Right.
Only help me?
100%. 100%. Okay, it's definitely something to chew on, that's for sure. This balance, because I think that's what it's all about, trying to figure out exactly where the boundaries of Chesed lie. What's the core of Chesed? But my basic point is, don't take advantage of people.
Right.
But when you feel taken advantage of, and you're taking advantage of, it's not Chesed, you're feeding into it. If you don't know what it is, give the benefit of the doubt. And remember, you become a godly person because the very examples of chesed that Hashem describes in the Torah are chesed that was more about the giver than about what you're doing for the beneficiary. That's the basic idea here.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I had one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Someone wanted one more question?
One more question, if you could, if you
Go
don't mind.
ahead.
Thank you. Rabbi Kerzner, I hear everything you're saying. It's so valuable. I'm wondering about generally when people come to a person to ask for tzedakah and they don't tell you what it's for, how much scrutiny is needed in general? Like what are you obligated and what should you, or is you just look at it as give everybody because it's all about how much you need to give?
That's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. When I'm approached for chesed, for tzedakah, so I I think that a random person who comes, you want to know who it's for. There's a reason why. There's a reason why a lot of communities have now a rule that you don't give tzedakah unless they have a certificate, right? It's because there have been a lot of scammers out there. There have been a lot of scammers.
Right. Yes.
I think if it's a person you trust, a person who's a respected Rav, a person who, a respected friend that you trust, then you trust the person. So you don't really have to probe too much. But definitely if a random person comes to you for tzedakah and if you're gonna give like $5, $10, okay, But if you're gonna give $100 or whatever you consider to be more substantial, I do
Or what
think,
they're asking, maybe a lot more, right? Yes.
yes, and I think that it's responsible to ask a little bit, to probe, because there are a lot of people who are scamming today. There's no question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyways,
Okay.
okay.
Thank
All
you
the
so
best.
much, Rabbi.
All
Thank
right.
you so much. It was
Thank
so
All the
beautiful.
best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Kerzner. We're just going to finish off with the last bit of